the breaking news is that Dangote have accepted unionization of its tankers driver. What is your perception of this news?
Yeah, I think, ultimately, for me, the whole thing was both parties, the union and the Dangote, had their own, thoughts about how they wanted to go about things. Both of them were well intended, but it was just to find a middle ground. For example, the Dangote had created, some sort of a parallel association to help the drivers on their welfare, and was also worried about disruption to business services because again, when the union take action, for example, it could be that a different company is complacent and the union wants to take action. And once they call for, or maybe it's even a disagreement with the federal government, once they call for that unilateral shutdown of operations, it affects everybody. So on one side, every business owner may be worried about potential disruptions to business activities that has absolutely nothing to do with them. So that's from the Dangote side. But the union side are also careful. We're also careful. They didn't want to set a precedent of making of people now beginning to find ways to boycott the union and make it less effective, whilst also looking out for the welfare of the workers and, of course, their safety. So, for me, it was well intended on both sides. It was just how to find a middle ground so everybody can agree and move along. So well done for a quick reaction from both of them. It averts the country from further threats of some sort of strike action that would impose more hardship. And again, it's now set a much more comfortable trade-off and precedent for employment and labor relations going forward in the sector and in the larger sector of Nigeria.
Very interesting. I really agree with you on that aspect because a lot of us, in the corridor of this economic and business engagement, have been looking out that this strike must not exceed, this first day, and it entered second day yesterday. But we kudos to all the members of the committee that sat together, the Dangote, the Opec, and the federal government of Nigeria, put it into an end. But I would also like to ask you, do you think this will really work for Dangote? Because there are people who are pessimists about this decision, that it may end up becoming a challenge to him going forward.
No, look, let's look at things very clearly. The whole concept of having perhaps a union look after the workers is to make sure that workers' welfare is taken care of. So again, it all goes back to your work philosophy. I tell people bluntly that there are three critical barriers when it comes to the effectiveness, or enablers when it comes to the effectiveness of any business. You have your equipment, which has to do with your hardware, your software. You also have your processes, which has to be the organizational philosophy and the way you want to run things. And then we have the third one being the people. The people are the most important. So, if the union are only after key things like people are, appreciated for what they do, people are given the mandatory rest that they should take, of course, which would now reduce the possibility of accidents, like we do have the Dangote truck drivers getting involved in a lot of, significant, tragic events by way of accident. They should rest well. They should be well remunerated. Trainings are mandatory for them, so that they can understand the importance of safety, and also making sure that these guys have their job security and that they're well appreciated and recognized for the value. If all of those are done and the remuneration is done properly, the union will not have to come and police anybody. I can tell you for free that there are companies that the unions have not had to go and harass, for lack of a better word. But it's all about your intentions. If you are going to keep to the welfare of your workers, then you wouldn't have a problem with the union. There's absolutely nothing to worry about. It's like saying, I see a policeman and I'm worried about why the policeman is walking my street. If I keep to the rules, then why should I be worried? I have no business with what he's doing there.
Interesting. But let's now get to our focus of discussion for today. OPEC Plus over the weekend had their meeting, And here we are, 137,000 barrels of crude oil will be added. And the total is a 1.65 million barrels will be added between October 2025 to September 2026. Doc, what's your reaction, gaining understanding of what OPEC Plus is all about?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a philosophy change from defending, higher prices by way of, making sure that the cuts happen. But also, it's also now moving towards a market share because you need to understand that whilst they were trying to make sure that the price per barrel are very profitable for especially people like Nigeria that are having low production, and so we want to be able to get out and get the maximum value. But continuing in that manner appears that they're going to risk losing their market share for to countries that like the US, for example. And I did tell you, it was on your show that I told you that it's also a strategy because if everybody goes bullish on each other and they begin to go to head, at some point the prices will have a knock-on effect that ultimately will bring prices to the point where the non-shell producers will begin to perhaps reconsider their investment because it becomes very unprofitable. When you look at the Saudi Arabians, you look at $15 per barrel production costs. You look at Nigeria, you look at about $40 per barrel. But if you look at shell producers, you're looking at sometimes $45, $50 per barrel. So if the prices plummet even further in those countries, they will have a challenge in continuing to produce. And that is exactly when they will begin to tone down on their production, and then the OPEC plus members would capture a larger market share. So this is just a supremacy of market share, of course, being underpinned by the voluntary reversal of their production cuts that were earlier there, although very much earlier. But we have to understand that this is much founded on the fact that there is an expected increase in demand as we round up towards the last quarter of the year. Experientially, we typically have increase in demand due to the weather changing. We have increased demand due to people just trying to get their final production out for the year in preparation for customers going around for their shopping. So a lot of production outlets are going to be working there at night. So more fuel consumption. Of course, the winter or the automotive heating will require more fuel. So definitely, that speaks volume as to why OPEC, which is also why OPEC is saying that, look, we are still flexible. We are cautious. Whilst being ambitious, we're still cautious and flexible, and we're ready to tweak things should the situation warrant that. But we also understand that even when there were production cuts, a lot of nations were in the OPEC cartel were exceeding their quota. Nigeria, for sometimes you saw the headlines, oh, Nigeria has exceeded its OPEC quota. So countries like Kazakhstan, UAE, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, all of those countries rather, were exceeding their quota. So it was only natural to see an increased ceiling to accommodate, so if there are allowances that other, members, states or nations wanted to take advantage of, it was only very much natural so. And, ultimately, again, the summary of this whole thing is that it's due to market share, reclaiming of market share, and also is also because there is a seasonal increase in demand that is expected. But like I said, the OPEC are ready to accelerate, pause, or reverse, depending on what the the sort of market evolution demands at any particular point in time.
Interesting. But let's take a look at what this would be in terms of implication for countries like Nigeria, because I was having a discussion with one of our colleagues, also an oil and gas expert like your Ombudsman, although economic energy expert, and he was like expressing his fear for Nigeria and some African countries that are also oil producers. But what's your take on that?
Okay, for me, right, it's a call to action, it's a challenge, definitely, because we've at some point, we were struggling with even meeting OPEC quota. And more recently, Nigeria has gone up to about 1.75 million barrels per day, well above what we used to do 3 years ago. And there are still ample opportunities for us to be able to go beyond those limits. Thank goodness, right? I like to hammer on the opportunities because, I mean, the status quo is the status quo. We can only analyze it, but there's really nothing in there to say beyond that, okay, this is what we're currently producing at the moment. But that being said, there is ample opportunity. Now, let me give you context. The people, I mean, before the whole concept of, divestment from IOCs and investment from the NOCs, a lot of people were apprehensive and saying, "Oh, what is the fate of Nigeria? Is Nigeria going to, go extinct in the oil and gas sector because NOCs are taking over?" I said, absolutely none. It's not true, because the NOCs, Nigeria, the Nigerians in the country anyway, are the ones that, because of local content, were the ones really driving the oil and gas stuff. The only thing that they, did with the IOCs was maybe funding, but that also created an, sort of a bureaucratic bottleneck when it comes to decision making. Sometimes you want to have a decision made, and you have to justify your decisions all the way to maybe, an executive in Dallas, Texas, or in the Netherlands for, Shell Petroleum, for example. And you have to justify your decisions, and it gets taken, at convenience, because they have other investments that they are looking at. Maybe the guy is looking at other investments in different parts of the world. So they don't sanction investments that quick, but in the divestment, the decisions are simply with the executive that are domiciled in Nigeria. And so when you see some of the grounds that we have already gained significantly in terms of our production, most of them are not coming from the IOCs. They're coming from the NOCs that have taken up the challenge and decided to be very patriotic and decided that, look, this is the only country we have. And when the call for action comes, they take on that challenge and they go in there and they boost their production. I do not expect anything different. There is a call for action. The presidential committees on oil and gas who have been working the fiscal terms are going to come up with that call for action. Executives are going to be pulled into the room. What exactly are you going to do from each executive to be able to boost the production? And they will give their quota. And if they have performed this way, and of course being championed, on the front side from the new executive of the NNPC. So I believe that, we are going to get there. It's a challenge, but we're going to surmount it because Nigeria has the expertise. It's just the funding that is the challenge. But right now we're getting around the funding hurdle. But I'm sure that we'll surmount the odds. It will take a few months, but we'll even exceed that same target as well.
Exactly. Now, Doc, before I let you go in the next 1 minute, what would be the positive side of this on the global economy? Once crude oil price, shrink either in one way or the other, the global financial market is also affected, inflation is also affected, and other aspect indicators around the economy is also affected. But what would be the positive side of this action of OPEC Plus going forward?
All right. So when prices are affected, consumers will be happy. The transportation sector costs will go down, and that's a form of disinflation in some form. But then what that means for the global context is that investors might be a bit reserved on their investments, spending when the prices become favorable, but consumers will be happy because it means that they have a better consumption power when it comes to their disposable income. But that being said, when it comes to Nigeria, what that means is that we're going to be selling more inventory for less of the price, less than ideal of what we should have thought, but it'll be a very ample opportunity for us to take advantage of those times or those seasons to be able to, kind of pay back our crude-backed loans, because it means that the opportunity cost of those crude-backed loans at that particular point in time is way lower. I mean, we don't get that much money from it, so we might as well give those barrels out as a repayment for our crude-backed loans. So either way, it gives us, some sort of opportunities and some sort of weaknesses. We just have to navigate carefully. and be able to reduce the consequences of the weaknesses and, of course, maximize the opportunities in context.